Hello there, men, and welcome to the Masculinism Movement channel, a place for men to be men and to talk about masculinity and men's issues. I'm your host, Brian Krall, and today we're going to be discussing the virtues of masculinity. And before we can discuss the virtues of masculinity, we need to discuss what masculinity is not, because there's been so much campaigning against it, done by feminists and such, a lot of other women in general as well. Just spread negative propaganda about masculinity, saying that it's toxic and this and that and the other. So for starters, masculinity is not inherently toxic. I'm doing a whole another video on that, so I'll address that in full detail there. Another thing is that masculinity is not the same as machismo. It does not have to be macho. Those two things are not synonymous with one another. And I'm going to do other videos on that distinction as well as a whole video on machismo, right? But you don't have to be a macho man, to sum it up. And there is a difference between masculinity and machismo. And similarly, a man does not have to be stoic, all right? Masculinity is not synonymous with stoicism. You do not have to suppress your emotions, act indifferent as a man, be sterile or unemotional. These things are not what real masculinity, true masculinity in its authentic nature is. All right, like stoicism and machismo and the suppression of emotions, these are all the same or very similar things. Basically, this is saying that a man shouldn't have feelings, right? Telling a man that his feelings aren't valid, that feelings are feminine, and that you need to repress your feelings. That's just not the way that it is, okay? A man does not have to be unemotional. If you have emotions, that does not make you less manly and more feminine. It makes you a human being. The only people who don't have emotions are like sociopaths and psychopaths, and even then, a lot of them have feelings too. Like, you know, you cannot try to say that you shouldn't have emotions as a man. And unfortunately, some people come from a culture that tells them that that is the case, that they need to be macho or they need to be stoic, right? That feelings are feminine. And to be a real man, you can't be talking about your feelings and such. And that's just not true, okay? Men have men who do have a fully functioning brain, who are not brain dead, you know, in their emotional centers, you know, and anyone with a brain has emotions, all right? So let's just get that out of the way. Next, masculinity is also not egotistical and selfish or domineering or bullying, you know, overly aggressive, any of those things. You know, again, these are things that they refer to as toxic masculinity. When they occur in men, it's just, you know, men acting egotistical and selfish, or domineering and bullying and overly aggressive, just like, you know, women can do that too. This is not inherent toxic masculinity or any kind of masculinity, right? It's just someone who is wired that way, right? That's, you know, that's a type A personality. It happens in men and women. So now that we've gone over what masculinity is not, let's talk about what it is and what its virtues are, all right, which it has many. And we're talking about masculinity in its ideal, purest, truest form here, okay? Masculinity is independent, internally validated, and self-actualized. A man basically needs to have his own sense of self and reality that comes from within and doesn't rely upon other people, you know, and any of those external validation factors. A man needs to be able to live as independently as possible. When we talk about independence, it's difficult because obviously we need community, but men need to be able to be at least somewhat independent, right? And you need to be self-actualized in having at least a sense of who you are, knowing who you are as a man, right, is a very important thing. Okay, and having that sense of masculine identity is obviously what makes you a man, so that's important too. But that's really just a basic level of identity, right? You know, self-actualization is something we like to think of as having a sort of a greater sense of consciousness, self-consciousness, like in personal development. But moving on, masculinity is strong and willful and assertive. I like to make a distinction between being assertive and dominant and being domineering, right? Bullying is something that is not inherently masculine. This is not a virtue of masculinity. Right, but being strong and willful and assertive is having that sense of energy, confidence, strength, etc. Masculinity is rational and logical and reasonable. This is something that men are known for over women, is being less emotional and thus less able to be pulled in different directions. There's going to be less flights of fancy, right? There's going to be more stability, more of an ability to call upon the man to think of what the most reasonable and rational thing is to do in that situation, because men are more rational minded than emotional minded, and women are more emotional minded than rational minded, right? That's just the way that it is. Masculinity is honest and ethical. Men are known for having a code of ethics or a moral code or some sort of code that they live by, or a system of values or what have you, that women are not known for. Women are not known for having any of these types of things. They don't even generally feel the need to tell the truth very often. But masculinity is honorable and high integrity. These are things that we value, respect, and honor. Having integrity, being a role model. We want to be seen as a good or great man. We want to do the right thing, right? And to be a leader. Masculinity is responsible, accountable, and dependable. This is something that gets agreed upon no matter what cultures. Like, one of the first things they say a man should be is responsible, or some synonym of the word responsible, such as accountable, dependable, right? That's what you want when you think of a man in your life. You want someone who's dependable, who you can rely upon and trust, who's going to be there when you need them to. This is stuff that you cannot expect of women, right? They have just too many flights of fancy. They're always going to be changing their mind, ping-ponging around from whim to whim, right? Men are able to meet their obligations. They are able to be held accountable, right? And we are proud of having the respectability of being known for responsible actions. Masculinity is careful, conservative, and cautious. These are values that go all the way back to the Stoic philosophy. Being very conservative and cautious. I'm not talking about conservative in a religious or political form, okay? I'm not saying you have to be a right-wing conservative Christian or anything like that, right? I'm just saying you don't want to go trying to leap forward too fast. This is something that is also spoken of in Taoism, in the Tao Te Ching, similar to what Marcus Aurelius wrote in Meditations, which is like the biggest Stoicism text. In the Tao Te Ching, which is the biggest Taoist text, it says, he who bounds ahead too quickly does not get very far. So what you'll find is with most men like myself and my father, and most of the men I know who have gotten older, have found themselves becoming more conservative, knowing what sorts of progress aren't that great. Like me, I'm very conservative with the use of social media and cell phones, because I don't see them as a great form of progress, right? So holding to tradition is what we really mean when we talk about being conservative. That's what the word conservative means, is holding to your traditions, and that's very important as a man, to hold to your masculine traditions. But being conservative also means being cautious, taking things carefully, which is very important. It's important as a man never to do anything too radical or risky or, of course, irrational. All right, you don't want to be erratic like a female, okay? You need to be a bit more careful and cautious than women, because as the Godfather says in The Godfather, the first one, the best one, he says, women can be careless, but not men. And what he means is that society allows women to be careless. Society allows women to make reckless mistakes, and it will pick up the pieces for them and help them clean it up, and then maybe even just do it for them. Get someone to do it for them so they don't fuck it up again. Whereas men do not have that luxury, okay, that privilege. Masculinity is confident, courageous, and brave. This is really what people are referring to when they casually use the term alpha male, when they like to think of this ideal image of a man, and they use the word alpha male. What they really mean is a man who is confident, brave, courageous, who can get things done, even in the face of fear, even in the face of intimidation, nervousness, anxiety, whatever sort of negative emotions might stop you. A man really needs to be able to do things that are scary, to face your fears, and to find that courage and bravery when you're feeling afraid of something. If you're enjoying listening to what I have to say, please like, share, and subscribe. And if you feel I'm adding value to your life, you can also tip me at the PayPal link below in proportion to the amount of value added. Your support will help me be able to continue this work, because the oppressive fascists at YouTube are against this kind of content and actively trying to suppress it. So it is only with the help of viewers like you that I'll be able to keep fighting the good fight against the evil fucking matriarchy. Masculinity is proactive and action-taking. That is really what people, when they think about any of the positive sorts of hero archetypes that I've talked about, what we have here is a proactive action taker. The hero can be anyone who does that. It can be a stupid person or a smart person, right? And when I talked about the lion archetype, it's like he's not the strongest or the fastest or the most enduring. The big key for a man to be successful and to get to where he wants to be, generally speaking, is just a matter of doing it, getting it done, being proactive, taking action, doing it, following through until it is done. Success is actually a lot more mundane than people might think. But a man is the type of person who can put in the work to go to a job day in and day out, to go to job interview after job interview when he's out of work, right? And to keep on doing it until he gets to where he wants to go. A lot of women and a lot of young men cannot do that today. Similarly, a man is driven, ambitious, and hardworking. Some of the archetypal qualities that society everywhere sees as being positive in masculinity is that strength of drive and ambition and the hard work ethic, that men are the ones who get up in the morning to go to the hardest jobs day after day to build civilization, right? Or to build companies, or to rise up through companies. Being a proactive action taker who just not only will take initiative, but will be driven to follow through and keep going until they get to where they want to be. Masculinity is resourceful and industrious. That is, again, some of the qualities that have given men the ability to grow and develop this entire civilization, right? But masculinity is also caregiving and protective, which is why fathers are so important and why men have been such an important backbone of the nuclear family unit. Masculinity is helpful and heroic. It's basically in our nature, in our wiring, to want to help others and even sacrifice ourselves for people who are smaller than us or women. It's just in our nature, in how we are designed. We're designed to be able to help out the young and help out our women, okay? And that's why masculinity is also about leadership, all right? It's dominant, it's authoritative, and most of all, it is leading. Masculinity is about being a leader. You know, when people think about the ideal man, what they're thinking about is some form of leader. Again, that hero archetype is someone who shows this leadership capability, and again, is someone who sacrifices themselves, uses their strength and abilities not for their own personal gain, but to help out the greater good of their community, you know, in many cases to sacrifice themselves. But masculinity can be aggressive, all right? And that's another thing that makes these heroes and great leaders to be effective, is that they have the ability to be aggressive, even violent, right? And even dangerous and defensive or offensive when necessary, because that's what is needed for them to be heroes. You know, they have to have the strength to do that in defense of innocence, in defense of themselves, you know, their families, and women or children who might be harmed. A man has to be strong enough to be aggressive and even violent and dangerous. Otherwise, you are just a weak man, you know, and you cannot claim that being peaceful and passive when you need to be aggressive is justified under some moral virtue, because it's not. You know, you're allowing a greater evil to take place when you should be stepping in, right, and standing up for the greater good. A man has to be able to do that, and you cannot claim that you're never going to be aggressive because of toxic masculinity, or you're never going to fight because you're a pacifist. You know, if you're a pacifist who cannot even defend themselves and their family against an attacker, you're not a pacifist, you are a pussy. You know, that is not what masculinity is about, okay? Masculinity needs to be aggressive just as it needs to be assertive whenever that is what the situation calls for. And even violent, dangerous, capable of taking life if it means, you know, you get to live, right? Your family gets to live because it was an attacker, or you get to feed your family with meat. You know, I mean, masculinity is about being able to be that hunter when need be. You know, it's a primal force. There's these sort of animalistic instincts inside of us that make us man, you know, and that's, like I said, there's that wiring that makes us a man. And a lot of that comes from our animal brains. All right. So masculinity is about having a certain sense of primal animal nature, and there's also a sexual and a creative force to that, a life force. Through our masculinity and our sexuality as a man, in having a penis, we're able to create new life inside of a woman. And aside from these archetypal virtues, masculinity is something that can't be put into much more of a box. You know, like you really can't pigeonhole a man, right? Or try to create this sort of generic template that is what every man has to be, right? There are certain masculine virtues that are universal that we can rely upon to become self-actualized and ultimate men. But when it comes down to specifics, any more specific elements beyond that, a man is free to be whoever, whatever he chooses to. And no one can tell you that you're not a real man because that you're not doing something that they do or that they want you to do. You know, like, this is something women, feminists will say a lot. You're not a real man because you're not doing what I would want you to do in this situation, right? It's just not something you need to even listen to, okay? Women do not get to define what masculinity is, all right? A man defines his own masculinity, all right? And if another man is telling you you're not a real man because you're not doing what he is doing, I think that's something men say because they get their own cultural conditioning so set in stone in their mind, about what their culture says a man is supposed to be, that you really just can't even talk to them about it, right? So you need to just basically say, look, you don't get to say what a real man is or isn't. You don't get to tell me how to be a man, and leave. All right. So don't let anyone tell you what to be or what to do in order to be a real man, okay? Masculinity is about freedom. Men have the free will and the willpower to choose to do what they want with themselves, all right? What makes us men is our sovereignty and our ability to exercise that will and do things that weaker, less masculine people cannot do. The more masculine you are, the more empowered you are in these ways, all right? So you don't need to be listening to people who are going to try to control you and manipulate you with your sense of your gender identity by telling you you're not a real man just because you're exercising your free will, which is in fact what a real man does. Okay, so be confident in yourself, do what you want, and don't let anyone shame your masculinity. Masculinity is important. It's essential. It is the backbone of society. It should not be emasculated. You should not be letting anyone emasculate you in any way whatsoever. All right. If they do, you now know what the virtues of masculinity are that are universal. Every culture agrees upon them. These are characteristics, traits and qualities that men have that women do not. So anytime anyone talks about masculinity being toxic, or the world not needing men, or whatever, women not needing men, or any of that sort of male shaming or emasculation, you can espouse the virtues of masculinity, all right? Because it is men who have built civilization and rule the world, and should continue to do so because we are the virtuous ones, all right? And that's why we really need to return to the patriarchal values and virtues of, society that we used to have, before feminism, before, the last 50 years of feminism, which is what I am going to be talking about next in the next video.
That concludes this video. Thanks for listening. I hope I mansplained that good enough for you. If you like what you heard, please click the like button. And if you feel you gained some value from this video and would like to give some back, please do so with the PayPal link below, because your support helps fund me doing this work and fight the good fight for men like you. If you are ready to take the red pill and wake up from the matrix and the matriarchy controlling it and learn everything you need to know about female on male sexism, get your copy of my newly released book called Misandry Exposed, on sale now for a special price that won't last long. So check it out by clicking the link below. And otherwise, take care of yourselves, men, because no woman out there is going to.